My wife left me for a rich man, she didn't know I was his boss. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I remember the exact moment the silence in our house stopped feeling peaceful. It started feeling heavy, like something was pressing down on my chest. The lights were on, dinner was cold, and the clock kept ticking louder than it ever had before. I looked at her and knew she had already made a choice. She just hadn't said it yet. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, almost rehearsed. There was no shaking, no tears. She talked the way people do when they believe they're upgrading their life. Every word landed slow and sharp. I listened without interrupting. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why. I already knew. She looked around the room as if it embarrassed her. The simple furniture. The quiet routine. The life we built without showing it off. She said she felt stuck, like she had outgrown this version of life. She said she wanted more than steady mornings and predictable nights. More than someone who came home tired and didn't talk about work. Her words weren't loud, but they were cruel. She spoke about ambition like I didn't have any. About success like it only mattered if others could see it. She said she deserved excitement, comfort, and security at a higher level. I sat there and let her finish because stopping her wouldn't change anything. I didn't defend myself. I didn't list my sacrifices or the nights I stayed awake thinking about our future. I didn't explain my work or the choices I made to keep things simple. Some truths don't help in moments like that. They only give the other person something else to dismiss. When she said she wanted a divorce, I nodded. Not because it didn't hurt, but because begging would only make it worse. Pain doesn't always show up as tears. Sometimes it shows up as control. I chose to keep mine. I could see relief on her face when I agreed. Relief, not sadness. That was the part that hurt the most. I signed the papers later with steady hands, even though my chest felt hollow. I kept my voice calm and my answer short. I let her believe whatever she needed to believe to walk away easily. That night, after she packed her things, the house felt empty in a new way. Not lonely, just quiet. The kind of quiet where you finally hear your own thoughts clearly. I didn't feel angry. I felt focused. I didn't lose my marriage that day. I lost someone who stopped seeing value in loyalty. And as I sat alone in that silence, I made one promise to myself: I wouldn't chase respect from someone who traded it for appearances. When we first met, nothing about our lives was impressive, and that's what made it feel real. We were young, hopeful, and building everything from the ground up. We talked about dreams in small apartments and cheap cafes, believing effort mattered more than image. Back then, Lauren liked that I was steady. She said it made her feel safe. We didn't have much, but we trusted each other. As the years passed, my routine stayed the same. I worked long hours and came home tired but present. I didn't chase attention or talk about money. I believed consistency was love. I thought showing up every day mattered more than showing off. I was focused on progress, not applause. Lauren slowly changed. At first it was harmless comments. She started noticing what others had. Bigger houses. Better cars. Expensive trips. She compared our life to theirs without saying it directly, but I could hear it in her tone. She asked questions that weren't really questions. Why don't we travel more? Why don't you dress differently? Why don't people know what you do? I tried to reassure her without arguing. I believed phases pass. I believed patience fixes most things. I didn't realize that comparison, once it takes root, doesn't need permission to grow. It feeds on attention and turns dissatisfaction into entitlement. The respect started fading quietly. She stopped asking about my day and started criticizing how I spent my time. She called my lifestyle comfortable but small, like stability was a flaw. She spoke as if calm meant weak and quiet meant lacking ambition. Every comment landed like a reminder that she was measuring me against people I didn't even know. I noticed she smiled less at home and more at stories about other people's success. Her excitement came from outside our life, not within it. When I tried to talk about us, she brushed it off. Said I worried too much. Said I was overthinking. Distance grew, not through arguments, but through disinterest. The betrayal didn't begin with another man. It began when she stopped seeing me as enough. When she decided that love should feel impressive, not reliable. I was still there, still trying, still believing in what we built, but she had already moved ahead in her mind. Looking back, the signs were clear. The cold pauses. The dismissive laughs. The way she talked about our future like it was something she was settling for. By the time the truth finally came out, the emotional damage had already been done. She didn't leave suddenly. She left in pieces, long before I understood what was happening. Not long after things officially ended, Lauren asked to meet. She said she wanted to be honest, like that would soften what was coming. We sat across from each other, and that's when she mentioned his name for the first time. Caleb. She described him as a successful investor, someone who understood the kind of life she wanted now. The way she said it made it clear she was proud of the choice. I met him soon after. He had the kind of confidence that comes from money being visible. The watch, the car, the way he spoke without checking who was listening. He smiled easily and talked about opportunities, returns, and connections. He shook my hand firmly, like it was a test. I noticed how he looked at me, like he had already decided where I stood. He wasn't rude outright. He didn't need to be. His tone carried quiet superiority. He spoke as if everything in life could be bought or replaced. Lauren watched him closely, laughing at things that weren't funny, leaning toward him when he spoke. I stayed calm and polite. Losing control would only give them something to justify. Lauren moved fast after that. Papers were prepared, dates were set, and decisions were made without hesitation. She didn't drag things out or second-guess herself. It felt less like an ending and more like a transaction she wanted completed quickly so she could start something new. I read every document carefully. I didn't argue over small things or demand more than I needed. I wasn't interested in punishment or proving a point. I let her take what she asked for because none of it mattered as much as keeping my self-respect intact. When it was time to sign, I didn't hesitate. My hand didn't shake. I didn't look at her for reassurance or closure. I signed because holding on wouldn't change the outcome. The relationship was already gone. What remained was how I chose to walk away. Caleb stood nearby that day, confident and relaxed, like he had already won something. He thanked me for being reasonable. I nodded and said nothing. Some victories don't need commentary. As I left, I didn't feel defeated. I felt clear. Clear about who I was and who I wasn't. I wasn't the man who begged for someone who measured love by status. I wasn't the man who competed over attention. I walked away with nothing visible to prove my worth, and that was enough. Because dignity, once protected, becomes something no one can take from you. After everything was done, I had time to think without interruption. That's when I realized something important. Lauren hadn't asked about my work in a very long time. Not real questions. Not the kind that show interest or care. At some point, she stopped being curious about my life and started making assumptions instead. I kept my work private on purpose. Not because it was small, but because I didn't want it to become the center of our relationship. I had seen what money and titles can do to people. Ego grows fast when attention follows. I wanted our marriage to be about who we were, not what I owned or controlled. I never lied to her. I just didn't advertise my position. I built my company quietly, with focus and discipline. I didn't bring stress home. I didn't talk about numbers or power. When I walked through the door, I wanted to be a husband, not a headline. I thought that mattered. The truth is, I was never struggling. I was careful. I chose a modest life because peace meant more to me than applause. I drove normal cars, lived simply, and avoided conversations that turned into comparisons. I believed love didn't need proof in the form of luxury. Lauren never asked why my schedule was demanding or why people treated me with a certain respect in professional spaces. She didn't wonder how things stayed stable even when others panicked. She filled the silence with her own conclusions. To her, quiet meant limited. Calm meant unambitious. She mistook restraint for weakness. She thought because I didn't talk about power, I didn't have any. Because I didn't show off, I had nothing to show. Silence became her excuse to underestimate me. I didn't correct her. Not because I couldn't, but because I believed if someone truly values you, they don't need constant explanation. They trust your character. They ask questions. They listen. Looking back, I understand that my choice to stay private protected me more than I knew. It showed me how quickly perception replaces truth when someone is already looking for a reason to leave. If she had asked, I would have answered. If she had cared, she would have noticed. But she didn't want understanding. She wanted reassurance through appearance. And I wasn't willing to turn my life into a performance to keep someone interested. I learned something important during that quiet reflection. The right people don't measure your worth by how loud you are. They don't confuse humility with lack. They don't need constant proof that you matter. I chose love over image. She chose image over patience. And that difference explained everything without needing another word. From a distance, her new life looked exactly like what she said she wanted. The apartment was high above the city, polished and expensive, filled with things that looked good but didn't feel personal. Everything was new, carefully chosen, and easy to show off. She told herself this was success. This was growth. This was winning. At first, the lifestyle distracted her. Nice restaurants, expensive meals, places she used to point at and admire. Caleb paid without hesitation. He liked being seen. He liked control, even in small moments, like choosing the menu or correcting how she spoke to servers. She smiled through it, telling herself confidence always looks a little sharp. But comfort didn't last. The quiet moments were different now. The apartment felt cold at night, even when it was full of light. Conversation stayed on the surface. When she spoke about her day, Caleb listened just long enough to respond with advice, not understanding. Everything felt like a transaction. Praise came only when she agreed. She noticed how often he reminded her of what he provided. Not directly, but enough to feel it. Gratitude became expected. Disagreement became tension. If she questioned anything, his tone changed. He didn't yell. He dismissed. And dismissal cuts deeper than anger. Slowly, insecurity crept in. She started watching herself more carefully. What she wore. What she said. How she reacted. The freedom she thought she was choosing began to feel conditional. She was part of the image now, and images aren't allowed to crack. In quiet moments, memory surfaced without warning. Not excitement, but calm. Respect. The feeling of being heard without having to perform. She pushed those thoughts away quickly. Pride doesn't allow reflection. It demands commitment even when doubt grows. She told herself this was just adjustment. That stability takes time. That discomfort was normal when leveling up. But deep down, something felt unstable. Not financially. Emotionally. The life she stepped into looked perfect, but it didn't hold her the way she expected. Every luxury felt slightly off, like it belonged to someone else. And admitting that would mean questioning everything she walked away from. So she stayed silent. She kept smiling. And she ignored the growing sense that what she traded wasn't equal. Work went on as usual for me. I didn't rush things or change my routine. When it was time for the quarterly executive review, I scheduled it like any other meeting. Clear agenda. Fixed time. Mandatory attendance. Nothing about it was personal, even though I knew exactly who would be in the room. The conference room filled slowly. Senior staff arrived early, laptops open, voices low. Everyone knew these meetings mattered. Decisions were made there that shaped careers. I arrived on time and took my seat at the head of the table, reviewing notes quietly. A few minutes later, the door opened again. Caleb walked in late. He didn't look concerned. He smiled, made a short joke, and took a seat without apologizing. He acted like someone used to bending rules without consequence. He hadn't looked up yet. He didn't need to. He assumed he already knew how the room worked. When everyone was settled, my assistant stood and formally began the meeting. She introduced the leadership present, moving down the list calmly. When she reached my name, her voice stayed steady, professional. This meeting is led by Ethan Walker, founder and chief executive. The silence was immediate. Caleb's head lifted sharply. His expression shifted from confidence to confusion, then to disbelief. He looked at me again, really looked this time, as if his mind was racing to correct a mistake that couldn't be corrected. The color drained from his face. His posture changed. Shoulders stiff. Hands still. For the first time, he didn't know where he stood. I didn't react. I didn't smile or acknowledge the moment. I simply continued with the meeting. Numbers. Performance. Strategy. The same tone I used with everyone else. Calm. Focused. Controlled. Caleb barely spoke. When he did, his voice sounded careful, measured in a way it hadn't before. He avoided eye contact. Confidence had turned into calculation. He was no longer performing. He was surviving. The room stayed professional, but everyone felt the shift. Titles matter when they change the balance of power. And his had just disappeared. I watched him struggle to process it all. The realization wasn't just about work. It was personal. He now understood who he had been standing in front of all along. Not a man he could dismiss. Not someone beneath him. Someone above him. I didn't say his name any more than necessary. I didn't correct him or remind him of anything outside that room. There was no need. The truth was already heavy enough. When the meeting ended, people gathered their things quietly. No one lingered. Caleb stayed seated for a moment, staring at the table like it might give him answers. I stood, nodded to the team, and left the room without a backward glance. That was the moment everything changed for him. And for me, it was just another workday. After that meeting, nothing about my behavior changed. I didn't call Caleb into my office. I didn't reference the past. I didn't acknowledge the personal connection that now sat between us. Distance is a form of control when used correctly, and I kept mine intact. The next phase was routine. Performance reviews don't care about emotions. They care about results. Numbers, deadlines, leadership, accountability. I reviewed his work the same way I reviewed everyone else's. No bias. No edge. Just facts laid out clearly. The picture wasn't strong. Projects under his supervision were behind schedule. Team feedback showed poor communication and low trust. Decisions were rushed. Credit was taken quickly, responsibility avoided just as fast. On paper, the confidence he showed in public didn't translate into consistent results. When it was time to discuss it, I stayed calm. I spoke clearly and directly. No raised voice. No judgment. I explained where expectations weren't met and what standards applied to his role. I gave him space to respond. He struggled. His explanations were careful, almost rehearsed. He promised improvement, talked about pressure, timing, circumstances. I listened without interruption. Then I reminded him that leadership isn't about excuses. It's about outcomes. He knew what was at stake. His position depended on my decision, and he felt it in every pause. The power shift was complete, but I didn't lean into it. I didn't enjoy it. Power used emotionally becomes weakness. I wasn't interested in that. I gave him the same option I give anyone in that situation. Clear benchmarks. Limited time. No favoritism. No protection. He nodded quickly, grateful for the chance, afraid of the alternative. Some people expected more from me. They expected a reaction. A moment. Something sharp. But revenge would have required me to step out of character, and I wasn't willing to do that for him. Fairness isn't soft. It's strict. It removes emotion and leaves only responsibility. And that's what I chose. When he left my office, his shoulders were tense, his confidence shaken. Not because I attacked him, but because I didn't. I treated him like any other employee who failed to meet expectations. That's when I understood something clearly. True power doesn't need to humiliate. It doesn't need to remind others who holds control. It just operates, consistently and without noise. I didn't win anything that day. I simply stayed who I was. And sometimes, that's the most uncomfortable outcome for someone who expected a fight. Lauren noticed the change in Caleb before she understood the reason. His confidence faded first. The relaxed tone, the careless jokes, the easy spending, all of it slowed down. He started coming home tense, distracted, checking his phone more than usual. When she asked how work was going, he gave short answers and changed the subject. At first, she thought it was pressure. Everyone important gets stressed, she told herself. But the stress didn't pass. It grew heavier. He snapped over small things and went quiet for long stretches. The man who once seemed untouchable now looked worried, almost careful. The truth came out one evening without drama. No big confession. Just exhaustion. He mentioned a meeting. A name. Ethan Walker. She froze. She asked him to repeat it, slowly. When he did, something shifted in her chest. She asked more questions, and the answers fell apart quickly. Founder. CEO. Final authority. The man whose approval Caleb depended on. Her mind rushed backward through memories she had buried. Late nights. Calm answers. A life that never collapsed no matter what happened around it. The stability she mocked suddenly made sense. Ethan was never less. He was private. The realization didn't feel like regret. Regret asks for forgiveness. This was heavier. This was shame. The kind that burns quietly and leaves nowhere to hide. She remembered the words she used. Comfortable but small. Safe but boring. The way she spoke like she was settling. Each insult replayed clearly now, stripped of justification. She hadn't just misunderstood him. She had underestimated him on purpose. Her new life didn't feel exciting anymore. The apartment felt tighter. The dinners felt forced. Caleb's presence no longer felt powerful, it felt uncertain. She realized how much of her confidence came from believing she had traded up. And now that belief was gone. She started questioning everything. Not just Ethan, but herself. Her choices. Her values. The way she decided worth by visibility instead of character. The image she chased now felt fragile, like it could shatter with one honest look. She didn't reach out. Pride held her back. Apologies don't come easily when they expose your own failure. But silence didn't protect her either. It only gave her more time to sit with the truth. Her world didn't fall apart financially. It collapsed emotionally. The foundation she thought she was standing on turned out to be surface level. And once that illusion broke, nothing felt secure anymore. She had wanted more. And now she understood exactly what she lost to get it. She reached out quietly. No long message. No explanations. Just a simple request to talk. I agreed without hesitation, not because I wanted answers, but because I had already made peace with them. We met in a neutral place. Nothing familiar. Nothing emotional attached to it. She looked different. Not in appearance, but in posture. The confidence she once carried was gone. She spoke carefully, like every word needed permission. She apologized. Said she hadn't known who I really was. Said she didn't understand what she was leaving behind. She talked about confusion, pressure, and mistakes. Her voice cracked when she mentioned how wrong she had been. I listened. Not out of hope. Not out of anger. Just respect for the past we once shared. I didn't interrupt her or correct her. Some realizations need to be spoken fully before they lose their weight. When she finished, I told her the truth calmly. I said she didn't leave because I was poor. She left because she didn't value loyalty. Because stability stopped feeling impressive. Because she confused quiet strength with lack of ambition. I told her I never hid who I was. I lived it. Every day. And the right person wouldn't need proof or comparison to see value in that. She cried then. Not loudly. Just enough to show understanding had finally arrived. But understanding doesn't change outcomes. It only explains them. I didn't offer forgiveness or rejection. I didn't reopen doors or close them harshly. I simply acknowledged her apology and stood up. There was nothing left to discuss. As I walked away, I didn't feel relief or victory. I felt light. The kind of light that comes when you stop carrying someone else's disappointment. I realized I didn't need an apology to move forward. I had already done that on my own. Her words didn't change my path. They just confirmed I was already on the right one. I left without looking back, not because I was angry, but because I was free. Time moved on, and life continued in its own way. Caleb's confidence never returned. The mistakes he had made in the past meetings, the poor decisions, the shortcuts, they caught up with him. His position at the company was no longer secure. Promotions were delayed, opportunities disappeared, and slowly, others began noticing he wasn't as capable as he had always claimed. The same charm that had impressed Lauren and intimidated others didn't cover up failure forever. Lauren watched it all unfold quietly. At first, she tried to justify it. Maybe it was timing. Maybe it was luck. But deep down, she knew the truth. The life she thought she had chosen, one of wealth, excitement, and status, had a fragile foundation. She began to feel regret, sharp and unavoidable, mixed with a deeper realization of what she had given up. The stability, respect, and quiet strength she had mocked in Ethan were gone from her life, and nothing could replace them. I didn't involve myself in their lives. I didn't gloat or send reminders of the past. I simply focused on my own world. My work, my routines, my principles remained the same. I didn't need to prove anything. I didn't need to show Caleb or Lauren that I had succeeded. That success, measured quietly and consistently, spoke for itself. Revenge, I realized, doesn't need fireworks or public humiliation. True revenge is in living well, being calm, and letting the truth become obvious to those who once underestimated you. I didn't need to confront Caleb or Lauren. They discovered it for themselves. Their misunderstanding and underestimation of me became their own undoing. Peace grew slowly but firmly. I didn't feel satisfaction in watching their regret. That would have been bitterness. Instead, I felt calm. The life I had chosen, steady, private, respectful, had survived every test. I didn't have to prove my worth because I always knew it. Every day reminded me why loyalty matters. Those who respect and honor it gain it in return. Those who disregard it reveal their character clearly. Silence, patience, and dignity are not weaknesses. They are shields, strong enough to hold against betrayal, pride, and misjudgment. I continued building my life with care and focus. I took pleasure in small things that had always mattered: steady mornings, meaningful work, moments of quiet reflection. Nothing flashy, nothing for show. Just reality lived fully and on my own terms. Looking back, I understood that the truest form of justice doesn't need words or actions aimed at others. It shows itself naturally through character and consistency. I had given no speeches, made no public gestures, yet the result was unmistakable. The people who underestimated me were left to confront their own mistakes, and I was left with peace. That peace is quiet, lasting, and unshakable. It is stronger than anger, louder than confrontation, and richer than any wealth one can flaunt. Loyalty reveals character. Silence doesn't mean weakness. And living with integrity is the most powerful revenge of all.